Hello, everyone. We're going to get started now. Good morning. Thank you so much for coming in today. Thanks for joining us for this great talk this morning. My name is Sophia Okai-Ugbaje. I'm a senior lecturer here at the School of Cybernetics. Before we go any further, I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're gathered on the unceded lands of the Nunal and Ngambri peoples and pay my respects to elders past and present. This has been a place of learning and knowledge exchange for thousands of years, and I'm incredibly grateful every single day for the opportunity to live, work, learn, and grow in this beautiful country every day. I'd also like to extend my acknowledgement to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders people that may be here today. Welcome and thanks for joining us. All right, just a few housekeeping. If you're new to this building, the toilets are just outside the door and to your right. If you'd like, they're non-gendered bathrooms. If you'd like a gendered one, please go one level down. As soon as you get down to the stairs is the male one, and behind the stairs is the female one. And should the fire alarm go off, please go down the stairs. The meeting area is just on the lawn, on the side of the building. Please make yourself at home. We have tea and coffee. Feel free to help yourself to those anytime. The session will be recorded and shared afterwards. All right, so our incredible speaker of the day, Paul Gordon. Today, we're fortunate to be joined by Paul Gordon, who has spent more than 2 decades working in exactly this kind of environment of making complex decisions. Paul is the CEO and technical director of Catalyze APAC, a boutique consultancy focused on decision capability and decision process design. Through his work, Paul supports governments, organizations, and communities to navigate complexity and make decisions that are clear, robust, and defensible. Paul is a fellow of the Society of Decision Professionals, and he teaches as adjunct faculty at both UNSW and University of Sydney. He's also the author of Hard Decisions Made Easy and hosts the Decision Clinic podcast, where he explores how leaders make decisions that shape organizations and communities. Today, Paul will share practical insights from his experience working on high-stake decisions in complex settings. I first met Paul at an event called The Gathering. So it was a conference that was organized that brought together experts in systems thinking, design thinking, and facilitation. So we both attended one session, and during that session, there was a sharing part. And I really enjoyed Paul's perspectives on things. And then afterwards, I had a chat with him. After that chat, I went on, looked Paul up, watched some of his talks, read part of his book. And I was really fascinated at his ability his structured approach to theoretical insights and bringing tangible outcomes from that. As someone whose research lies at the intersection of moving beyond theory into practice,
might be me.
As someone whose research interest lies at the intersection of moving beyond theory into practice, while recognizing the value of theoretical grounding for effective practice, I really saw the value of what Paul does, and it's really hard to find that. So thank you so much, Paul, for coming in today. Please join me in welcoming Paul. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia. And it's really a privilege to be here in this beautiful building, in this amazing city, in this conversation. And we all know that 73% of all statistics are made up on the spot. So I'll make a statistic up. But you learn about 80% more if you sit in the front row than if you sit in a row behind. So feel free to come and sit in the front row. I won't bite anyone for getting up and moving around. It just makes me, I feel lonely when there's empty chairs at the front anyway. Sophia, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And it was a real joy to meet Sophia, especially in an environment where we were all there learning, sharing ideas, learning from each other in different contexts. And it's kind of, I guess, one of the things I love doing most is this. Although I run a consulting company, so I suppose my day job is the CEO and technical director of Catalyze APAC. And a lot of what I'll talk to today comes from the work that we do. So I'm going to share some real examples. But actually, some of the work I'm most proud of is the work I do more in this kind of context. So I have the privilege of leading a unit on the part-time MBA at the University of Sydney. We're just coming up to our third year, and a room full of 50 people like yourselves who are curious, don't take no for an answer when someone else says that'll never work, goes, I don't care, we'll try anyway, is a really fun place to be. It's challenging for me because it's much easier just to go, here's some material, go and take it on, and off I go. But actually, I invite you to kind of lean into the conversation today. So to make this your conversation as much as mine, really my commitment, I guess I've kind of come across this over, I've sort of landed upon this commitment over the last 20 years, is to transform the way the world makes decisions. I know we look across the world, resources are poorly used, there's conflict, there's climate issues, there's all sorts of things going on. And my firm belief is that with bringing some more structure and consciousness to our decision making, we can really impact that significantly. So anything I can do that can contribute to transforming the way the world makes decisions is a win for me. And the easiest way is with a room full of people who are committed to doing things differently. So thank you for being here and your commitment and your journey. And my commitment is that you'll walk away with something new today. And maybe not just a copy of my book. So I'm, for those that haven't guessed, I'm originally from the UK. I studied at the University of Southampton, and I studied electronics and computer science. So I'm an engineer. I met some students earlier, and like you, I'm a nerd too. So and what I love, one of the reasons that I think I got into this world is when we think about decision making, we think of decisions as systems of decisions. There's no such one decision that just operates in isolation of itself. And so as long as we can start, my view, bringing more systems thinking to decision making, we've got a much better chance of making sense of it. The problem is, of course, we immediately fall over in complexity and scale and goodness knows what. I've lived in New Zealand for 10 years, so I carry a British passport, a New Zealand passport, and now an Australian passport. And my wife's American, so I could carry an American passport. So I consider myself a child of the Commonwealth, let's say, and really enjoy kind of bringing those different perspectives to what we do. So I'll share some different examples from all over the world. The work we do is, as a consulting company, mostly working with large organizations, a lot of work in the public sector, so hence Canberra is a very frequent place for me to come from. I live in Sydney, for those that don't know, and do a lot of work also in the private sector with oil and gas companies, big manufacturing, etc. So I'm very happy to, as we go, I want to make this interactive, so please jump in with your thoughts. Feel free to ask questions as we go, but we'll definitely make sure we have time at the end for specific Q&A as well. And I'll give you the heads up, just so that you're ready. When we come to the Q&A at the end, I've got 5 copies of my book. The first 5 questions gets a copy of my book. So there we go, just a little incentive for you. Okay, anyone know what these numbers are? I'll tell you the answer. This is roughly the number of breaths that we take a day. This is roughly the number of thoughts we have a day, although our statistics would tell us about 95% of those are just repeating thoughts. They're not new thoughts. Now, probably different in this group because of the environment that you're in. You're trying to park all of those repeating thoughts and have new thoughts and create new ideas. This, the number of decisions we make a day. Big number, right? How on earth do we survive making that many decisions a day? Well, of course, most of them are entirely unconscious. In fact, it's a good job that these are all unconscious, because if you had to pause to take every breath, we wouldn't really have time and attention to do anything else. And the same goes for this. If we had to pause to make every decision for 35,000 decisions, we would be entirely locked up doing just that and nothing else. So it's just interesting to put this in that context, because when I talk to let's say a hipster audience, I say, who's done some breath work? Anyone here done breath work? Yep, it's a thing, right? Cold plunge, box breathing, all that stuff. And so it's become, and so one of the essences of breath work is the idea of bringing consciousness to our breath. So it allows for a bit of meditation, allows for a bit of mindfulness, allows for centering. And so the world of breath work has taught us about the value of consciousness and presence. And I want to argue that decision-making is the new breath work. If we can bring that same level of consciousness to our decision-making, that same level of presence, we've got a much better chance of making decisions that we're satisfied with, that will achieve the outcomes that we want. So it's kind of a fundamental tenet of what I believe in. The more consciousness we bring to our decision-making, the better off we are. Because how many of us have found ourselves, I don't know, with a new thing that we just bought in a place that we don't even know how we got to, in, I don't know, a relationship we don't know how we got there, in a course that we don't know how we got there, because of course the decisions that led us there have been unconscious, and we look back and go, how did that happen? I mean, we've all been there in some respects. So our opportunity is to start to bring some consciousness, some presence to our decision making. Okay, how do we do that and why do we do that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about over the next 45 minutes or so. So what are we here for? Well, you're probably here to hear something interesting. What I think we're here for is really to go on a little bit of a journey from this idea of unconscious decision-making that just happens to much more conscious, much more present decision-making. And what I want to do is kind of introduce us to some principles that will help us do that. Because my view is that, you know, my world is decision making. I sometimes call myself a decision scientist, a decision analyst. In fact, yes, one of my fortunate affiliations is I am a fellow of the Society of Decision Professionals. Has anyone heard of the Society of Decision Professionals? No. I mean, you've got, we know, the Chartered Accountants Institute. Well, the Society of Decision Professionals is like that for people like me, a lot smaller, a lot more niche. But it's really about the world of studying how we make decisions and what can improve decision making. So I think that behind every problem that we look at, or every opportunity, and we haven't got to look very far outside these windows to see problems, opportunities, challenges, there's a set of decisions that are just waiting to be made. And if we can put our attention on those decisions, we've got a chance of moving through whatever the problems or challenges are. Because what changes the world? Action's the only... It's the only thing that, I'm going to have to manage that. It's the only thing that changes the world is taking action. And unless we make a decision, we will never take any action. So my, let's say, grandiose statement is the source of world peace, removing climate impacts, is decision making. There we go. Okay, so just to take a moment for yourselves, have a think about a decision that you've maybe made recently or you've got coming up. And it can be anything. It doesn't need to be epic kind of, you know, on enormous scale, but something a bit more significant than, oh, what shall I have for lunch today? Do I want the salad or the sandwich? Not that, but just have a think for a moment about a decision in your life. Could be in your course, could be in your work, could be in your families, your community. Have a think about it. And if anyone's struggling with the decision, I would be surprised. And then the decision is which decision to choose. So that's the decision for you. I'm just going to give you a moment to reflect on that, because the question I'm going to ask, and because fundamentally I'm both a consultant and a lecturer, I can't speak without writing. I can't think without writing. I'm going to just scribble a few ideas up here. My question is, if you think about that decision, think from this decision here. What makes you think it's hard? Why might you be avoiding it? Why might you be concerned about it? What is it? What makes decisions like that hard?
One decision, it's like, if it goes one way, it goes really well, really bad.
Yeah, consequences. So I make a decision and something happens. You could say that's the point, right? The point of making a decision is something happens, but there's a good or a badness to the consequences. Yeah, okay, what else?
Related but not making the most optimum choice.
Oh, optimum. Now, of course, in a room with academics in it, I say, well, let's talk about optimization. What do we mean by optimization against what variable? But so, yes, there's some view that there is a right choice, an optimum choice, and I want to make sure I make that right one. Is that right? And that tends to lead us to this idea of there is a right or a wrong decision that we can make. Yep. Ambiguity. Can I add to that uncertainty as a similar thing? Just as an interesting little straw poll, COVID happened. We all remember that, yeah, the pandemic. We might have, in the middle of it, we probably didn't imagine ourselves just sitting here normally next to each other having a conversation because the world got so strange for us. At that moment, who felt the world was more uncertain than it had ever been? Yeah, of course it's not, right? We know it's not more uncertain. It's just our experience of it being more uncertain. And so uncertainty is an interesting place to look from. Is there more uncertainty or not? No, nothing's changed about the uncertainty, but what's changed is our perspective of it, our view of it. And by having it in front of us and us being more conscious of the uncertainty, it then had us resist decisions where there was high uncertainty. There's a question point at the back. Great, you've unpacked a whole bunch of things there. So trauma, I think, is what you said. So something that happened to us that had an impact on us that then has some kind of emotional relationship for us, some cues that lead to our emotional response. And so emotions is one of those things. Yep. Peer pressure. Ooh, I like that. That can be slightly ironic and say, who here experiences peer pressure? Of course, no one will put your hand up because you're experiencing peer pressure by having to put your hand up. Yes, so there's a, let's say something about the environment saying, come on, make that decision, hurry up. And of course, in a commercial context, it's not just peer pressure. It might be your boss saying, do this thing, the shareholder saying, do this thing, your board of directors or whatever. So there's other factors saying make the decision, and that's influencing your ability to make the decision, and then back to our what's the right or the wrong decision. Anything else? Yep.
That seems safer than what executions will just change.
Great point, yes. There's a sort of safety in the status quo, which you could say it's pretty certain, right? Because we know how the status quo goes. So the certainty of the status quo is more comfortable to us and feels safer to us. Yeah.
Two links, one about reversibility. Can I hold that back? And then tied to that, up and down, does this open more choices, more decisions, or am I putting myself into a route?
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say optionality. So reversibility is a fascinating one because there aren't many things you can't reverse, but killing someone and having a child are probably two of those things that I wouldn't say I've experienced one of those, and I'll let you guess which one. Optionality, I think, is an interesting one because the way you put it was, oh, that gives me more places to play. But did we think optionality could be a negative for some people? It's like, oh no, don't give me more choice. The menu at the restaurant has got too many things on it. Can I have fewer, less optionality? Exactly, yes. And as pointed out, and I was asked by this on my podcast by Tony Nash, the founder of Booktopia, which was entertaining that he asked me this question. He said, so Paul, do you know the origins of the word decide? And now, fortunately, I did know the answer to that question. And it comes from to kill off. So the point of decision is basically we're saying we're going to take away some optionality. So our fear of making a decision might come from we don't want to reduce the optionality. So there's a world of things going on here. So no one said this, but I'm going to write it up here, I'll use the word stakeholders. Oh my goodness, there's so many people's opinions that are going to be impacted by the decision that we make, that are going to be unhappy about it, that are going to put pressure on me trying to make that decision. So there's a world of things here. And no one said it. I thought you might say it, Sophia, but let's just put the generic word here, complexity, up the top. It's just basically too hard. There's too many options, too many pathways. And actually, often what is driving most of our behavior is this. I need to make the right decision. If I make the wrong one, can I reverse it? That's okay. I can probably be okay if I can reverse it. If I make the wrong one, what are the consequences for other people? If I make the wrong one, what will people think of me? So what's behind a lot of this, what makes decision-making hard, is the human condition. And so how I look at this, and of course, entertaining in the context of the School of Cybernetics, is what's the human piece in decision-making? So What I'm going to introduce you to and have a discussion about is the idea of a set of principles that, if we underpin these in our decision making, can help us address some of these things. And in fact, what I'm going to ask of you as we go through this conversation is to check in with these things here as to whether what we've got here helps us. That's the intention. If the answer at the end of it is that doesn't help us at all, then let's find something else. And this simple framework, I've given it a name that I call decision thinking, partly because, the best, borrowing other people's work. Who here studied innovation and design thinking? Yeah, funnily enough, so have I, and that's where the word decision thinking came up with. But the idea is, if there's a way we can think about decision making that built on a set of principles that we can apply literally to the decision about what am I going to have for lunch, or the decision about, and I'll use a slightly topical one, which nation am I going to part with for our future submarine capability, just random example, who would imagine where that might be happening, is we can apply these principles. And I love principles because they allow us to kind of go, oh, what's missing? Why am I struggling? We know when we're struggling with a decision, we might be avoiding it. It might feel hard. We might feel under stress. We might be experiencing peer pressure. So when we're in those moments, what can we go to that will give us some freedom in our decision making? This idea of decision thinking. So we're just going to unpack these 4 principles. And when I say this, someone says, what is decision thinking? Decision thinking is this idea of, back to that breath work, bringing consciousness to our decision making, bringing transparency. And often I say that in a public sector context when I'm kind of working in Russell or whatever. I say transparency, we can't do that. We're classified, it's secret, it's all those other things. But transparency can apply many different ways. That doesn't mean to say you have to give up the company secrets. So bringing more transparency to decision making. Bringing more structure. And, we all understand, we all work in the world of things like modeling and process. So bringing more structure is what will help us. And this word here, which kind of is the genesis of Sophia and I, because, the gathering that we were at together was in this world of facilitation, co-design, kind of better together rather than on my own context. And that's fundamentally what I believe in. Collaboration is what's going to really help us with our decision making. So if we can bring consciousness, transparency, structure, and collaboration to our decision making, we will make decisions that stick. And this, not just it's the subtitle of my book, but the key in decision making, I think, isn't the making of the decision. Because frankly, we could ask a random number generator that will give us an answer. The challenge is a decision that sticks, that we don't then need to undo. We don't then need to fight for. We don't then need to go up in front of Senate estimates for. So really the thing that has us not make decisions is less about whether it's the right or wrong decision, but more about, I suppose, to the first point, if the consequences are the angry mob is going to come out and cry for my resignation because they don't like the decision I made, then I'm going to avoid that decision. So really what we're trying to do in decision making is not make the right or wrong decision, because do you think there is a categorically right or wrong in any decision that we make? I mean, we could probably find an example, especially as we get deep into the moral domain. Using my example earlier, probably taking a life is probably, there is no right answer for that. But mostly any decision that we make, you can find a perspective where it's not it's the wrong decision. It's a poor decision. Picking a random example, laying off a bunch of people in a company looks like a bad decision. And frankly, we've seen this, in the big tech world, right? The AI world. It's like, 10,000 people have gone. That's a terrible decision, such a bad decision. Well, it might be the right decision if that's what has the company survive and thrive. It might look like the wrong decision if you're one of those people that's been laid off. Or maybe if you're one of those people that's been laid off, it's the right decision. Thank goodness I'm free of this nasty company. I can go and do something more interesting. So the challenge is we like to think that there is a right or a wrong in every decision, but actually there isn't really a right or a wrong. And the challenge in the decision is having it so that it lands and sticks. So, and I'm going to use one example. Yes.
It should be right or wrong, but under certain goal you're looking for, and the circumstances you're having now, not in the future, not the past, what's going on now with you.
Yes, and the challenge is, one of the reasons I push against the right or wrong decision is we get hung up on it, and then it moves from a nice conscious structured decision into something about morality. Someone says, my opinion is the right decision is we never lay off a single worker. You've made the wrong decision by laying them off. There's no room in there for understanding that as a decision. It's like, oh, well, actually the decision's been made against the lens of morality, and that's not helpful for us. And, you know, I promised that I'm not going to get caught up in all the other world events that are going on today, because we'll not have this as an upbeat conversation. But acknowledging the world is not a happy place at the moment. So that's a challenge for us, right? Is that the more we think about it as right or wrong, because the human being, you know, anyone here love being wrong, right? We're not wired as humans to be wrong. Now, academically, we like it, right? Because we learn something and we know we've got to fail fast and all those good things. But as humans, we're not wired to be wrong. And often a lot of our upset in our life comes from the argument between right and wrong. And because if I'm right, mostly it means someone else is wrong. And so I haven't got a great environment for agreement, and certainly not decisions that stick. We're doing this. Well, you're wrong. Okay, we're doing it anyway. Well, I'm not coming with you. And, you know, we know what happens. And it's particularly prevalent if we, you know, look from a public sector perspective, because as soon as we make a decision that feels like it's the wrong decision, that doesn't have the support, then what happens is there's plenty of avenues for people coming out and saying, the government should change. I'm going to talk to my local member, or whatever it might look like. So sticking is what we're looking for here, not making the right or the wrong decision. Because if we do that, then what we actually want as humans is we want confidence in our decisions. All of this stuff are the reasons that we feel we don't have confidence, we don't want to move forward. So let's start with the first of our 4 principles. And the idea here is, so I'll tell you a story about a British example. It's a little old, but it's still very relevant today. So as we all know, there's nuclear power in Britain. It's been a big source of energy for a long time. The downside with nuclear power, one of the key downsides is, of course, the fuel and the spent fuel and what you do with it. So the British government have been humming and hawing for years as to what to do with nuclear waste from a power station. And, you know, some of the things that people say, oh, I'll stick it in a rocket and send it to the sun and it's going to have no effect on anyone, is all very well, except what happens if the rocket happens to, I don't know, spin around in space and land back in the middle of Australia? Probably not a good answer. So, you know, there's some constraints on what you can do with nuclear waste, but there needs to be a decision. And do you think you can make no decision? The waste is piling up. I mean, the only way you make no decision is you turn off the nuclear power facilities, and you've still got the waste that's already piled up. So they had to make a decision about it. About 10 years prior to the work I'm talking about, the government had kind of come to a conclusion. They'd made a decision about what they're going to do with nuclear waste. They made an announcement, and this didn't happen. The lobby groups came out, that's rubbish, you can't do that. The environmentalists came out, are you crazy? The technical people came out and said, that's not possible. There was uproar. So the government basically said, we've made the decision, but we're going to pause it, we won't do it. They couldn't not make a decision, so they kind of came back round and kind of came into our orbit, and we said, well, there's probably a different way of making the decision. What was the process by which you made the decision? Well, okay, let's start there. So the first thing we did was work with them to work out a decision process, because mostly decisions start with content. So when I talk about content, I mean what should we do? Should we store it here? Should we store it there? As you know, in your lives, I suspect most of your decisions start with someone saying, I've got a great idea, we should do this, are you with me? Or let's try this, or buy that. Anyone been in any presentations for any vendors of technology? Do you think they're saying, oh, let's help you make a decision? No, they're saying, buy this thing. So decisions mostly start with content. And the problem with that is, anyone want to speculate? Why is that hard? Why is that a challenge? Content is very contentious. As soon as someone says, do this thing, someone else says, rubbish, no, we should do the other thing. And you've immediately started a decision from some kind of conflict, from some contentiousness. Instead, if you start your decision with the process by which you're going to make the decision, you've got a different conversation. We need to hire this new member of staff for our team. Oh, my cousin's amazing, we should hire my cousin. Okay, well, let's just put your cousin over there for a second. How are we going to make the decision on who to hire? Let's make sure we've got a process. Now, that is a much easier thing to agree on. Basically, by putting some people together, you can say, how are we going to do this? Are we going to have a vote? Are we going to all have a chip in, take our 5 minutes? What are we going to do? We can agree on a process for making a decision much more readily than we can agree on the content. So it's a really powerful way of starting our decision making is what's the process? Now, process might look like, in the example I'm using, the British government, when they came to us, we said, okay, the process is probably going to involve a series of workshops to involve the public, all the lobby groups getting together. It's going to involve building a decision model. It's going to involve this, this, and this. That work of the process was going to be probably a 9 to 12 months duration. So significant process. Probably you don't need a 9-month process to decide what you're going to have for lunch, but you're probably still going to have some kind of process called, I go and look in the cabinet, I see what's available. I listen to my gut and I go, oh, I feel like chicken, and then you'll have the chicken. But that's still a process. So having a process really gives us much more freedom in making the decision and experience of control over the decision. If we don't have a process, we're almost certainly caught up in the opinion about the content and the so on. Oh, yeah, someone's told me to do this thing, I'm going to do that thing. In fact, what had happened the previous time the government had made the decision was they didn't have the process wasn't transparent, it wasn't public, no one knew how they'd come to make the decision. They basically just made an announcement. So that was the first problem that they were facing, no process. So process before content, think of your decision process. And now there are many different decision processes you can use, and I'll kind of mention a few things as we go through, but being clear on having a process is critical here. Anything anyone can see about, I mean, process is a word that's very familiar with everyone in this room, I'm sure. And I mean decision process. Of course, there's lots of other processes that we use, but what can you see about this as a principle? Anything that strikes you, anything that occurs to you in your decision that you might have in mind, I asked you to think about earlier? Yeah.
I think it's the refining activity. Think about all the things that I've got to do before I make a decision is sort of my emotional state at the time. Think about what my other impacts and things like that. So when I think of process, I'm like stopping everything to go, right, let's gather all of our things and really evaluate and refine everything before I think.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So what you've done there is you said, I can think of some steps, some refinements. I'm getting a few things together in one place before I get to a point where I make a decision. So my process has a point at making a decision here, and it's not here. So exactly, perfect example. There's another hand I saw there.
Because they're ridiculous and long and criminal and complicated, but they do often rust up in the process. So you have forward working, your first whole process, you might have a rolling text, which is actually a process for moving beyond intent issue and current inquiry one agreement. I haven't thought of it through that prism.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. And it sounds like what you find is the process gives you a place you can come back to. If things start going off, hang on a second, we're not yet at step 5, or we said we'd do this and we haven't done that yet. So it's a place you can come back on track if you get off track. Yes, yeah, perfect. And the word one of my favorite words in decision analysis is the word requisite. So this is the idea that what you want is a process that is sufficient to solve your challenge, but not overkill. So it's sufficient in function and form to do what it's intended to do. I'm sure you use requisiteness a lot in the School of Cybernetics because we all know we can build these beautiful edifices of things that are amazing, but actually could have been this big. And big means all sorts of things. Yes.
When we're doing research, and we want to be able to repeat and so we can show off that well, someone can do the same thing too.
It's a perfect example. Yeah. So what you may be saying to yourselves, and you're entirely free to do so, is this is blooming obvious, Gordon. When are you going to say something new? In fact, this whole everything we're talking about here is actually how we make decisions. It's just we don't know that's what we do, and mostly we don't do it well or consistently. And exactly repeatability is important for us because it allows for audit. So in the public sector, what's the process by which you came to bring this forward to blah, blah, blah? Well, we can go back and look at it and we can test and make sure. But also next year, when we come to allocate the budget for X, Y, Z, we're just going to use the same process as last year. And in fact, it's something that in our work in the public service, we're seeing more of. There's this interesting, I'll sound like a cynic, interesting, strange drive for the federal government to want to say, no, we don't need external help. We need to make as much use as we can of the public servants, bring everything in-house. But you therefore need to bring us process, train us in the process, and we'll run the process and turn the handle. And, there's some, let's say, false assumptions in that. But that is a way, to your point, of actually now, next time, we don't even need to have a conversation about the process. We all know what it is. In fact, the most successful companies have clear decision process in most of the things that they do. So repeatability is very important in process. So that's the process before content. Have a process about how you're going to make your decision. Sorry, is there a hand wave going over that? Yes. No, that's all right. So I was just looking over here and I missed you. Sorry.
So I was going to ask, are you going to talk about circuit breakers? Your view of that?
Yes, so I'll mention that in a minute, and if I don't, please do ask me again at the end, because you're absolutely right. The reason I wrote the word requisite up there is because often process is not requisite, and it looks like it's self-serving. We have a process just so that we never have to make a decision. Great, we can have this conversation forever. I'm on the Parents Association committee for my school, my kids' school, and we're literally in that kind of, hang on, we haven't got a decision process here. What we've got is a conversation process, and that can end up in paralysis. So yes, we definitely need circuit breakers that have us move on to the next step. And often one of the reasons we get caught up in the step is people are avoiding the bit called the decision. It's like, oh, if we just talk about it long enough, we might never have to make the hard decision to restructure the business or the hard decision to change this policy. So thank you. Great question. Okay, so second principle is the principle of academic rigor. Now, you're all really smart, so you're all looking at that sign, and some of you will be going, what's going on there? Anything that we see wrong with that sign? Yeah, we've probably got some mathematicians in the room, haven't we? So it's really dangerous putting math up when you've got mathematicians in the room. Of course, we've got no business adding up a date, an elevation, and a population to get to a total. It's nonsense. And unfortunately, this is often what happens in poorly designed decision processes where there is no academic rigor. We kind of go, I've got some numbers, I added them all up, the biggest number won, which means we happen to go down the road to Silver Hill, which is slightly lower elevation. We go, well, Silver Hill's clearly a worse place to live because its total is a smaller number than this. We pick the highest total. We've all seen decision processes that kind of add numbers up in a bit of a random number generation way. So what academic rigor says is just make sure that what you're doing, how you're basing your decision, has something that's defensible. Built in the realm of decision science, it uses data and numbers correctly. Now, well, we're half an hour in. First time I say the word AI, 2 words, AI, which is surprising because, frankly, we can't have a conversation that lasts more than 5 minutes without saying AI in any context at the moment. But one of our challenges, of course, in the AI world is we use our robots to go and find a whole bunch of stuff. We go, great, these are all of our decision data. We're going to use that to support our decision. Yet, unless we're clear on its training set, where the data's come from, unless we have our own ability to kind of, as a conversation Josh and I were having earlier, our own ability as the humans to kind of pick it apart a little bit, we can end up in this situation without even realizing it. And we've got this beautiful model that's told us 27 is the highest number, you should pick that option. So academic rigor is about that, using data correctly, understanding the difference between data and value. Just because the number's bigger does not mean it's better. So there's a relationship there that we need to understand. And also making sure that when we have our process, if someone says, how did you get here? We can say, here's how we got there, not, I don't know, we just asked the computer to make a decision. So this is academic rigor. If we don't use academic rigor, the risk is we don't trust our decision. In fact, it's many of my points that sometimes seem counterintuitive, is that the more rigor we have, the more our emotional connection to the decision is stronger, because we can say, yeah, it doesn't feel right. The Gold Hill's a better place than Silver Hill, yet my numbers tell me it is, so I better check that. And if we use some rigor, then we get to places that our intuition, which is very important in decision making, is helpful. If we do use academic rigor, we have some confidence. Yes. I could be, Dante, so that's an academic question. It is, and actually, between these four walls, I don't say this, don't tell anyone else, but when I write my book and I send it off to a bunch of people to review it, Professor Larry Phillips, Professor of Decision Science at the ANU School of Economics, he came back and said, and in fact, his words were on the front cover, "Love your book. Why did you pick the word academic? It seems like the wrong word." It probably is the wrong word, is the short answer. Don't tell anyone. Really what I'm saying is use a level of rigor that is grounded in some techniques, some principles that you can stand by. And why the word academic, I don't know. So sorry, that's the honest answer. Because yes, and I have been challenged, it's not really the right word. It doesn't mean you need to have this entire PhD thesis behind the work that you're doing. And in fact, requisiteness would tell you don't want that most of the time. Okay, our third principle, and this is the one I want to dwell on a little bit today, because I think it's very important in the context the context of here in Canberra, what you're involved in, because this is this relationship between, let's say, humans and decisions. So this is the principle of active stakeholder participation. Anyone see any of those three words that strikes you, or that maybe feels different, or active? Active and participation. Yeah, we normally hear the word stakeholder with other words, don't we? Like engagement, management, I don't know, misdirection. Well, no, we don't. So yeah, participation is a key word here, because the opportunity in good decision process is to have stakeholders be part of that process, not just tell them. And the phrase that people always use is, we've got to get the stakeholders on board. Now, I don't like that term, because it sort of implies they're off board and we're dragging them over here going, you're on board now. That's not actually what we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to achieve is stakeholders experiencing some sense of ownership and commitment to the decision, because you could say this is the heart of decision sticking. If your stakeholders look at a decision, go, yeah, it looks okay to me, I had my say, I'm good, it's going to stick. If they look at it and go, how did you come up with that? I have no idea. So using our example, the nuclear waste example, the first thing that we said was, you've got to get stakeholders involved in that decision. Well, what does being active look like in that context? Well, we're going to need a set of workshops that's going to have a diverse group of stakeholders. And we need everyone from the sort of pro-nuclear energy over here, the engineers going, it's the future, we have to have nuclear energy, all the way through to over here, the environmentalists going, this is horrific, this stuff. Why on earth are we doing it? We should close down all our nuclear power generation. So you've got to have the whole spectrum. So we said we're going to structure a set of workshops that brings them together. Now, who relishes the idea of putting that spectrum of people in a room? It sounds like, I love it, great. We should talk about work. Most people don't, right? People want to put groups of people together who are going to agree with each other and have a nice, jolly old time, not who are going to go, those guys over there are idiots, we shouldn't be using nuclear power. And so that's a challenge. This is one of the reasons why this often is, the resistance. One of the things that people ask me is, when you put this in front of clients and say, who are you going to put together, what's their reaction? And often it's like, we could never do that. Those people will not come to a meeting. Those people would not be in the same room as those people, et cetera, et cetera. That's a common challenge that we see. So the key here is, I say the key and then list a couple of points. Keys here are, firstly, participation looks like participation in the eyes of the stakeholder. So I might say participation means you come to a workshop and you scribble some notes and you stick things up on a post-it on a whiteboard. I might say that's participation, but for you, that might not be participation. For you, participation might be just send me a thing and I'll read it and that's good. So important here is to understand what participation looks like from the perspective of the stakeholder. And what you might be surprised from all of our work is when you ask, you get the answers you might not expect. You might get this lobby group as like, I got to be at every workshop so I can throw things and fight and argue. And they go, just make sure you send us the material before decisions are made so we can read it. Okay, great, that's participation for you. And other people who are like, who you might think would just go, I don't care, go, no, I'm going to be there and I'm going to make sure I've got a seat at the table. So participation can look like many different things depending on who the stakeholders are. And the opportunity for participation then becomes, as I said earlier, once decisions get made, if we can see how our input has been taken into a decision, we're much more likely to experience some sense of commitment to the decision. So there's lots of techniques here. Yes, is that a question at the back? Yes, oh yes.
These are all true. Have you seen any of the research into human and AI collaboration in decision making, augmentation, censorship, and the fact that reality is perceived 100 to 300 milliseconds slower by us than them? They can reach multiple decisions in the time it takes us to blink. Have you seen that starting to bleed into the work because more and more AI is being adopted throughout business, government, etc.?
So the short answer is yes. The medium-sized answer is, and I'm just going to caveat this because, so I should be clear, I stand here as a practitioner, so I'm not doing active research in these areas. I'm doing research, let's say in a client context where they say, how do we solve this? The longest answer is fundamentally, I believe in human group techniques for participation that might look like workshops, it might look like surveys, etc. And I've seen work being done in how can AI augment that? Not asking the AI for its opinion. So frankly, that's always going to be a mistake to say, what's your opinion? Because an AI is not going to have an opinion. It's only going to have an opinion someone else has given it. So don't ask it for an opinion, but you can ask it to help elicit your own opinion because it can do a good job of asking you some questions. It can also do a great job of assimilating. And so AI is to, let's say, to moderate conversations where you've got, because the biggest challenge here is it's all right for 10 or 20 people, but when you say, what about 1 million people start participating in a decision? How are you going to manage that? The challenge there becomes complexity, data, scale, and things like AI are very helpful there because they allow for people to what looks like random noise to come together in a way that AI can make some kind of sense of. So that's where I think there's a lot of value in AI providing. It is very good also at helping us, it's very good at helping us follow process, for example, and we're very bad at that. So I think there's some good moves in that area. The big risk and the red flag I raise to anyone who asks me about what's the future of decision-making in AI is that the minute we delegate our decisions to our AI is the moment that we're lost. Humans always need to make decisions. They need to be the ones that execute on those decisions. Now, back to my earlier point, decisions are a system of decisions. There may be micro decisions that, of course, AI are making. They've already made a decision only to serve us up the 3 things that we might be interested in, not the 3,000 things. There's a decision there. That's okay, but the authority, which I'll talk about in just a second, needs to sit with the humans. And that's an interesting area.
That reduces the static a little bit.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, yeah, and yeah, sorry, thank you. Yes, managing the AV, I appreciate that, Cherise. So, the challenge here is how to have stakeholders participate. There's lots of different ways of doing it. And like I said, if you can engage with them to ask them, and this was our challenge in the nuclear example, how are we going to get all these people in a room? And the answer was, well, we are going to get the people in a room. And then what we're going to have them work on is not a fight with each other about what the right answer is. So my second key in stakeholder participation is a little bit of a do not go to a stakeholder. Oh, you're a stakeholder. What do you think the right decision is? Because what do you think you're going to get? You're going to get answers called, you should do this. You go, oh yeah, but we haven't made the decision yet. Well, I don't care. That's what you should do. So what there is to manage, the opportunity is not say, what should we do? Is to say, how does this decision affect you as a stakeholder? You can ask 100 stakeholders. I can hear how the decision affects them. We can still make a decision, one decision that everyone can be aligned to because they can see the impact of that decision on them. So that's very important. It's very, very seldom done. Most paralysis in decision making, and the reason people avoid stakeholders is As you would have heard it, if I get 20 people in the room, I get 200 opinions. What do I do with 200 opinions? Don't ask people what to do. Now, 2-second rant, forgive me. It's why if anyone says to me, what do you think of referendum as a decision process? And, we've got some recent examples in this country, the same as in the UK and Brexit, for example. So the short answer is a referendum is a terrible decision process. It's not really a decision process. What it mostly is a process to force someone to take a side and then stick to the side. And the problem is exactly this. Referendum says, are you a yes or a no? It doesn't say, how does this affect you? What might be some perspectives? It says, are you a yes or a no? And once you say I'm a yes or a no, because we as humans do not like being wrong, I'm now going to reinforce being a yes or a no. And when someone says, do you think we should, I'll use the Brexit example. I won't use the yes vote example here. The Brexit example. Do you think UK should leave the EU? If you say yes, now I've got to look really stupid if I change my mind. So I'm going to find all the evidence I can that yes is the right answer. And Boris Johnson could drive his bus through London with how much money we're spending on the EU every day. See, look, I'm right. I'm right. Yes, yes, yes. You're the yeses over here with me. Those no's over there, they're all wrong, aren't they? Yes, we think they're wrong. So what have you built? You've built an immediate divide just by the design of your process called it starts with asking people what we should do, yes or no. Don't do that. Ask people, stakeholders, how the decision impacts them and affects them. And so this is what we did in the nuclear waste example. We put them in the room and we said, well, what are some of the considerations of where we store nuclear waste? One of the considerations that came from that group is we care about the burden on our future generations. Now, whether you're pro-nuclear or anti-nuclear, you can agree that burden on future generations is a concern. So straight away, we've got an agreement between this entire spectrum of people, even if we don't think we should have nuclear waste or we think we should have it. So what we're doing is saying, get people together in a context where you can have a productive conversation that doesn't immediately jump to what's the answer. And in fact, really, the reason I sometimes call myself a decision analyst is the practice of decision analytics is breaking down decisions and starting to deal with them piece by piece. And that helps us get away from this, what's the right answer? Again, exactly the opposite of referendum. So if we have good stakeholder participation, we will get commitment to executing on our decision. Great, that's what we want, decisions that stick, people going, go you. And all of the data and all my personal experience shows that you can make a decision that someone doesn't agree with, but they will live with if they can experience their position being taken into account. I'm sorry, we are making you redundant. I know you don't really want to be made redundant. And you can say, yeah, fair enough. I can see through transparency the impacts on the company. I can see why I'm one of the people on the list. I can see how my considerations were taken into account. Fair enough, I'll live with it, which is quite a different situation from you're out of here, nothing you can do about it. And you go, hang on a minute, right? You can see how different that plays out. And that was exactly what we were doing with the nuclear waste example, because we needed the stakeholders to go, we've been in the rooms. And one of the things that often happens, stakeholders go, oh, I didn't realize how hard this was. It looks like a simple decision. What do we do with nuclear waste? But you put them in a room and you have some engineers going, well, here's the technical. Really? Oh, yeah, I suppose if we don't put it in the right place, some terrorist organization in 100 years can dig it up and then throw it at us. And, oh, that's a bad thing. We don't want that. Oh, okay, yeah. And then 5 generations from here, we're going to have this. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. So the participation allows for learning that helps people really engage with the decision and understand it. One of the things that is very, and definitely we've all seen this, decisions that either come unstuck or, I don't go back to the UK very often, but I was back there in September last year, and it's a pretty somber place, a bit sad for me as, my home nation. And everyone's like, yeah, it's a bit grim here. Why is that? Well, no one, whether you're a yes or no, is happy that Brexit has been effective. We haven't got all the promised good stuff. We're dealing with all the bad stuff. It's miserable. So you end up with decisions that either come unstuck or basically everyone is just unhappy about. There's a little thing, I'm just mindful of my time. I'm just going to touch on this very quickly. One of the challenges people say is, well, in my company, so to your board paralysis example, we all have an equal vote, so we never make any decisions. Key then is to define how your stakeholders participate in what roles. And you've seen many other versions of this. You've probably seen RACI matrices. You've probably seen the rapid model for Bain. Lots of people have models. I like models. Let's have our own model. But the principle is, if you can identify a role that a person can participate in, it gives them some comfort and also it allows you to move through things. So Firstly, you want a decision manager, the person who has got carriage of the decision. I'm running the process, I'm seeing it through. Doesn't mean to say I sign it off, it just means I've got carriage of it. That's one person, never more than one. Then you may or may not have a decision authority. Oh yeah, the chairman of the board has to sign off on this proposal, so they are the person who does have the sign off. Often they don't even need to be in the decision process. You just need to make sure the process meets their requirements. If you use good process, the authority should mostly be a yes. So if you're finding things get stuck at the board because the chairman's saying, I'm not signing this off, then it's often your process that's poor. Then you can have people contribute. Now, this is the idea that, what do you think? What are your ideas? They're not necessarily going to play out in the decision, but we love your contribution. So you've got some freedom to have some things to say without it necessarily impacting the decision outcome. As distinct from evaluators, and these are people that probably are in the room when you're actually doing the work of, let's say, making the decision, voting, using whatever process. And that way you can be very clear. Stakeholders, how'd you like to participate? Please don't put me on the hook for the actual decision, but I've got some thoughts. So you've got some freedom that you can give some people. And then finally, of course, the decision doesn't do anything unless someone says, I've got this, I'm now going to execute on it. So an implementer role. So by defining roles, we can set ourselves up for success and helping manage expectations with stakeholders. So that was a very quick whiz through there because I want to get to my favorite. And like all parents, I have two. We don't have a favorite child, do we? My favorite principle is the principle of intangible and tangible value. One of the greatest problems in decisions. Have we ever made a decision that we regretted? Yeah, right. And, I use car buying. I know it's probably a bit gendered, I apologize. But, we've bought cars that we're like, I thought this was going to be the best car ever and I hate it. And I suddenly realized I bought the car and everyone's driving the car and I thought I was the only one. We've made those decisions, right? And the source for me of that buyer's remorse or that regret is we made a decision that didn't accommodate something that mattered to us. Why didn't we do that? You should, of course, accommodate everything that matters to you. Well, I'll give you a secret. This is my world. In buying a new car, cool is something I care about. Oh, you're an idiot, Gordon. Why do you think cool is important? Well, it matters. And if I had chosen a car that I didn't think was cool, I would have very serious buyer's remorse in my car buying decision. So we've got to make sure we have intangible and tangible value. Back to our nuclear waste example, the tangible stuff might be obvious, right? You might say ecological impact. You might say economic cost of doing it. But the intangible, like the burden on future generations, is just as valuable in the decision. And if we don't accommodate both aspects in decision making, and sometimes I get into arguments with people that say, yes, but the economics matter. I say, yes, they do. Tangible is also up here. It's not just the intangible stuff. So if we allow for it, we actually get decisions that matter to us. They give us what we really want. If we don't allow for it, it's very easy. We end up in regret. And this works both ways. Either we're missing something that matters. I'll just pick my example of cool. And that's why the workshops with all those stakeholders in the waste example was so important, because we asked them, what else matters in this decision? What other impacts can you see? What other risks can you see? Surface that through a stakeholder conversation is very powerful. But if you also take into account something you don't care about, well, we're a business committed to the environment, so environmental sustainability is an important factor in our decision making. We will make decisions based on the environment. And then you make all these decisions, you go, God, I hate our company, which all we're doing is this. Oh yeah, we really didn't care about that. So make sure you've got what you do care about and not what you don't care about. Bring that into your decision process. And like I said, the example for nuclear waste was a whole spectrum of things from future generations through to economic impact, through to ecological impact. And also what was very interesting in nuclear, as you might imagine, is time frames in what you care about. Some things they cared about tomorrow and some things they cared about 100, 1,000 years into the future. So thinking about what matters to you, not just now, but what matters in the future. Okay. One other thing I want to leave you with, just a little bit of tongue-in-cheek because I love Star Wars. Anyone know Yoda? Yoda says, there is no do or not do, there is no try, right? Don't get caught in the Yoda trap, because in making decisions, this is the one option decision, I call it. There is only one option, do it or don't do it. And the problem with that is it leads us to decisions also that are poorly made. In fact, my alternative quote is, one you must pick, three there always are. never have a decision that doesn't have at least 3 options in it, because unless you've got things to compare with, you're actually going to get yourself stuck. So I just want to leave you with that little bit of fun. Okay, I'm just wrapping up. So to kind of circle back, if we can bring these 4 principles into all of our decision making in a requisite way, then we're going to get decisions that give us great outcomes that stick. That's the whole point of all this. And I'll leave you with some homework if you want to take it on. It's up to you. That decision you were thinking about earlier, 2 things you can do that will probably make a difference in it straight away. Firstly, who are the stakeholders in that decision? You'll always find stakeholders you've forgotten about. Oh, I didn't realize that which course I do at university, my friends are a stakeholder, my family's a stakeholder. Think about who they are, because that will shift your perspective on your decision. And secondly, thinking of don't fall into the Yoda trap. Make sure you've got at least 3 options. You don't go, I love the open day at ANU. It's coming up in a couple of weeks' time. How cool is this? I must go to ANU. It's like, at least go and look at a couple of other places, even if you end up back at ANU, because you'll be much more satisfied with your ANU decision. Of course, you're already here. Okay, I'm done. That's a QR code to buy my book. Thank you. That was a bit of a funny ending, wasn't it? Thank you. We will have some questions. I know I'm already over time, so I'm so sorry, Sophia. I was not paying enough attention to the time. That's the QR code from Amazon, but I did promise there are 5 copies of my book, so the first 5 questions each get a copy of the book, which I'm happy to sign. There we go. And you have to remember that you're the first, because I'm not going to remember who. So, but your question. Okay, excellent.
Boards of executives and things where you do your job, people ever talk about game theory?
Yeah, so the question for the recording is a question about work with boards and so on. Is there a conversation about game theory in decision making? The short answer is yes, and people often say, can't we just use some game theory here? Isn't that going to make the decision for us? And if I look at the discipline of decision science, it brings lots of the perspectives of game theory, psychology, sociology into play. And that sounds a little bit like I don't have a clear answer, and the answer is I don't have a clear answer for you. So yes, it comes up a lot, but it's not something that I guess I would consider myself a practitioner in using game theory in decision making. Sorry, that's probably not the right answer, is it? You wanted. Okay, number 2.
Fail to, not because your model is wrong, but sort of fail to reach the outcome, and what you have observed about what's most likely to lead to failure in the time.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, and so the question was how I worked in cases where even if we've gone through all this, we've ended up in a poor outcome. I'm paraphrasing. The short answer is yes, and that's often the biggest source. Two biggest sources. The first one is the unwillingness to truly engage with stakeholders. So no matter what we might say, they go, yeah, that takes too long. We're not going to do that. And then when it actually comes to the execution of a decision, those stakeholders come out the woodwork, the policy can't get shifted or whatever. So that's the one reason. The other reason is actually often lack of courage in considering enough options. So we did this really big project with the government in New Zealand, and we had lots of workshops, all the stakeholders, great. We got to this outcome and they said, well, yeah, all the options, we can do all of them. I'm like, did we really need, why didn't you think bigger and go, well, we could have had these other options. Oh yeah, but we didn't think they were a good idea. So that's the other thing, is the lack of, because once you've got a good decision process, you can be much more expansive in your thinking, but unless you're prepared to do that, you just end up literally going, well, we said we're going to do all these things, we're going to do all those things, so go you, yay. So that's, I'd say, is the, well, exactly. I know. And of course I look at myself and go, you're an idiot. Well, you didn't spot that earlier, but yes. So there we go. There's a couple of examples. And it is mostly lack of courage often in the proper engagement or the due process. Yes, there was, sorry, I'll come to you next, but number 3 over there. Yes.
What is the best way to fight off decision paralysis? I can decide if I know all the circumstances surrounding some decisions, but I can make the decision still, like how to decide finally something.
Yeah, great. So how do we fight off decision paralysis? 2 things I'd probably say. the first thing, and I think back to my wife, who often gets stuck in decision paralysis. And this is no disrespect to her. She's got her own tech startup, so lots of decision challenges. Two things. The first thing is often it's because you don't have a process. So just stop where you are and go, have we got a process? Because if your process doesn't have in it somewhere execute the decision, then probably that's why you're in paralysis. That's one. So stop and get a process. And the second one is often lack of options is what causes the expansion. I don't really like any of these. I've only got 2 options. But actually, when you think about options from the opportunity for more options, you can always find other options, even if they might feel a bit left field. Oh, we would never think about doing that. Well, let's put it on the table and see how it stacks up. So often paralysis is actually lack of options. You were number 3, weren't you? Number 4 at the back. No, that's okay.
For me, you talk about consciousness when it comes to making decisions. And so I'm really struggling at the moment with organizations slapping on AI into their workforce because they have this understanding that with an LLM they can get more information, but then with more information comes cognitive overload, and then arguably they're not making good quote-unquote decisions. How, and we've also touched on giving AI authority, or that humans should have the authority in decision making. How, or have you experienced in your work, are people actually coping with that issue around trust and authority and balancing the new information variety that's coming into their organization?
Great question and a big question, and I'm going to try and summarize it for the recording. The questions around the challenge of let's say, increasing prevalence of AI in the workplace, which has consequences, cognitive overload, etc., and then how that relates to trust, and then potentially organizational liability on the decisions that are made, etc., etc. The short, transparent answer is it's such an emerging field that I can't point at a client and go, oh yeah, they've just done this and solved that. I would say, so the guidance that we're providing to people is pretty much like I said earlier. Almost you imagine our roles, if you just to go back to this picture here, pick where's AI in that? Well, AI might be here, right? So if we think of AI, if we, and I know this is probably a fleeting moment we can do this, but if we imagine AI, think of an AI agent as another member of our workforce, rather than as we have a member of our workforce who's got these kind of AI arms and legs and so on. If you think of them as another member of the workforce, how would you engage them in your decision process? So if you've got good decision process and you can identify where they can participate, and you don't put them here, you don't ask AI, what should I do? You ask AI, what might some options be? Then you can navigate through that, because ultimately, if you have a decision authority and if you've got good governance in your organization, then before you commit the organization to this market direction, or you commit to investing in that portco as a VC, then you're still going to have a human that says, I'm signing the term sheet. The AI hasn't signed the term sheet. Now, and it's interesting because my wife's got an AI deep tech business that's venture backed. So she grapples with all this, particularly in their use of AI in response to the due diligence questions coming from the investors. So the challenge there is also you've still got to follow the governed due diligence process. Here's the questions. How we answered them, well, of course, we're going to use the technology to help answer them and even to frame our answer in a way that answers the question. But there's still a human in the middle of that saying, I'm tasking my AI to help answer the questions. So it's making sure that we put the humans in the place where they do the bits that they really do and don't just throw them all away, which is the risk, because of course the great promise of AI is these humans, we can all be tending our gardens while the AIs do the real work. And the challenge is that's not actually going to be productive in this context. So I haven't got a very, short answer is let's have another conversation, because I'd love to explore that further. Okay, well, you were number 4 and you're number 5.
Thanks for the talk. I'm interested, you were talking about systems of decisions. I'm interested in the dynamics of establishing, maintaining, and potentially challenging or decommissioning those decision processes. We're thinking in terms of your establishing a new decision process in an organization. there's an amount of uncertainty. You can have a good process and turn up and it's like, okay, we've got 70% chance that this decision is going to lead to a good outcome, 30% is kind of negative. We've done our due diligence, we get unlucky. How do you avoid people going back and saying, well, the process was unhelpful because we still got it wrong, especially in those areas where there's uncertainty. And the flip side of that, if there's already a decision process in place that is, problematic or missing, but still through luck or uncertainty seems applicable and okay, how do you challenge it? So how do you build those learning loops, not on this consequence of the decision, but on the process itself?
Yeah, so again, for the recording, the challenge is managing decision processes, auditing them, testing them, being willing to review them and change them, and also, how do you even know what an effective decision process is? And my answer to that is that's where you got to start from. You can, like anything, right? You got to say, well, what does success look like from this process? And it might be different in different contexts. If success is we've got a new level of transparency, we've got a new level of customer engagement than we ever had before, it's probably a successful process. Or if we've gone the opposite way, so as long, like any process, as long as we know how to measure its effectiveness, then we ought to have points in place where we can shift it and change it. And I'd say in my clients we've built enduring decision processes with them. The ones that work well are the ones that build in a review cycle that say, let's just stop and test this. And we did some work over many years with the pharmaceutical company. And what we noticed was they were using the same process year on year, and their decision space, the options they were exploring, narrowed further and further because they became so familiar with their process. They knew what options were going to win and they started putting them up, and they became less innovative. So that was a trigger for review the process. In fact, what they were missing was the criteria in their process were actually out of date, and they needed to review those, and that reopened the problem space for them and gave them much more place to move. The fundamental challenge from a, let's say, process engineering and management point of view, it's a good question, and it's not something we've got deep experience in, because often a lot of our work ends up being solve this problem rather than build this entire system. So that's a challenge. Yes, I hope that sort of answers your question. You're welcome. Okay, I can stand here and talk all day. So so we've got your five. So if you're one of those five, come to your front, I'll give you a book. I'm very happy to take other questions offline. My contact details. Oh, I haven't put them anywhere, but you can find them from Sophia. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I always love these kind of conversations, which is why I can stand here all day. But I do realize I'm already well over my time. So.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. Actually, we do have a deep dive afterwards with the master students. So if you'd like to ask Paul some questions, please feel free to join the deep dive, and there will be light lunches. So, something.
I don't want to shortchange the deep dive conversations. The more I overrun here, the less the time gets compressed there. So thank you all for those amazing questions and that commitment and dive into really how we can shift our decision making. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.